Cowboys. Just the word conjures images of dusty trails, galloping horses, and lone figures riding into the sunset. But how much of what we know about them is actually true? Were they truly the fearless, rugged heroes we see in Western films? Or is the reality far more complex and surprising? In this video, we'll explore the real story behind the American cowboy. From their surprising origins to the harsh realities of frontier life, prepare to see the Wild West in a whole new light. Because behind every legend, there's a truth waiting to be uncovered. The cowboy didn't just appear out of nowhere. His story begins after the American Civil War, in a time of Reconstruction, opportunity, and expansion. The war had left the South in ruins, and many young men, especially former Confederate soldiers, looked westward for a new start. At the same time, America's hunger for beef was growing, especially in booming cities like Chicago. Cattle ranchers in Texas, where livestock roamed freely, suddenly had a booming market. But how to get the cattle there? That's where the cowboy came in. These riders weren't gunslinging outlaws. They were working men. And the job? Grueling, exhausting, and far from glamorous. Yet from this tough labor, a national legend was born. Forget the polished image of cowboys with clean boots and perfect hats. The real cowboy lived a life of constant labor and danger. Days began before sunrise and ended after sunset. Cattle drives could stretch for hundreds of miles through rivers, deserts, and unpredictable weather. Cowboys faced stampedes, snake bites, and exhaustion. Their beds? A bedroll on the dirt. Their food? Beans, bacon, and black coffee. Pay was low, injuries were common, and death was a constant risk. But for many, it was still better than staying poor and jobless back east. Cowboys were resilient, adaptable, and proud, but their reality was far from the Hollywood fantasy. Here's something Hollywood rarely shows. Nearly 1 in 4 cowboys was black. After the Civil War, many freed slaves headed west and found work as ranch hands and drovers. They brought skill, strength, and tradition to the trade. Mexican vaqueros, some of the first real cowboys, had been working cattle in the Southwest for centuries. Their techniques, gear, and language shaped cowboy culture profoundly. Even Native Americans, often forced from their lands, adapted to ranch life and became skilled riders. The cowboy wasn't just a white gunslinger, it was a multicultural figure born from necessity and frontier survival. The Wild West was more diverse than we've been told. Every cowboy had 3 things: his hat, his horse, and his saddle. The iconic wide-brimmed hat wasn't just for show, it shielded from sun, rain, and dust storms. Spurs and lariats weren't decorations. They were essential for roping cattle and managing herds. The saddle was often custom-fit because cowboys spent 12 hours a day on horseback. Horses were not just transport. They were partners. A cowboy's horse was his lifeline. Even the cowboy's language, words like rodeo, lasso, and chaps, came from Spanish. The gear wasn't flashy, it was functional, and it told the story of cultures blending on the frontier to create a new kind of American hero. Cowboys didn't follow written laws, they lived by an unwritten code. Respect, loyalty, and grit were everything. You helped a fellow rider in trouble, shared food if someone was hungry, and never left a man behind. Stealing a horse was worse than murder. Reputation meant survival. In the vast emptiness of the frontier, word spread fast. If you broke the code, you might not last long. This rough honor system shaped communities and cowboy crews. It wasn't about being a saint. It was about keeping the group alive and the job moving. The Cowboy Code wasn't official, but it was sacred. Break it, and you'd better ride far and fast. Hollywood loves duels at high noon, but real cowboys rarely pulled guns on each other. Gunfights did happen, but not like in the movies. Most disputes were settled with fists, not bullets. A cowboy's pistol was for protection, against wild animals or rustlers, not bar brawls. In fact, many cowboys didn't even carry guns. The legendary shootouts, like the OK Corral, were the exception, not the rule. Towns often banned firearms within limits. The myth of the gunslinging cowboy grew later, thanks to dime novels and Wild West shows. The real West was gritty, dangerous, but less theatrical. Cowboys didn't seek fame. They sought work, peace, and a warm fire at night. Behind the scenes, or sometimes in the saddle, were the women of the West. Ranch wives, trail cooks, and even sharpshooters like Annie Oakley. Women worked the land, raised families in isolation, defended their homes, and sometimes ran entire ranches. Some disguised themselves as men to ride on cattle drives. Others ran saloons, schools, or operated businesses in rough towns. Their contributions were massive, but history often left them out. These women were as tough and brave as any cowboy. They endured loneliness, childbirth with no doctor, and wild weather. The frontier didn't care about gender. It demanded strength. And women answered the call with grit and grace. By the late 1800s, the golden age of cowboys was fading. Barbed wire fenced off the once open plains, and railroads connected the West to the industrial East. Cattle drives became shorter, ranching more corporate. The rugged freedom of the range gave way to rules, towns, and taxes. Cowboys found themselves out of work, or adapting to a world that no longer needed their skills in the same way. But their legend had already taken root. Photographers, novelists, and Wild West shows turned real men into myth. The cowboy became America's symbol of rebellion, independence, and grit, even as the real West changed forever. Today, the cowboy lives on, not just in movies or rodeos, but in the American spirit. He's the lone rider against the storm, the symbol of self-reliance. You'll find him in country music, in political speeches, in fashion, even in video games. But more than that, the cowboy reminds us of a time when survival meant hard work, loyalty, and courage. He represents a story bigger than history. It's about identity, freedom, and frontier dreams. The real cowboy may be long gone,